A lot of characters in Street Fighter V have V-triggers or skills that are seemingly useless or super matchup specific. And because of that, there's a general agreement on which setup is best for a certain character. With Sakura, both her V-triggers and V-skills are viable, and the choice comes down to a combination of preference and matchups. So I'm going to show you the pros and cons of using each skill or trigger with Sakura, and when I prefer to use one over the other. We have 4 different combinations to choose from here. So let's start with the most common choices for new players. V-skill 2, V-trigger 1. This setup is generally agreed on as being the most well-rounded combination. Let's start with V-skill 2. With V-skill 2, when you score a counter hit, rush counter, with standing heavy kick, you can easily convert with V-skill 2. And right away you're in the corner. This skill is pretty easy to hit confirm too. You can press the V-skill pretty late. Without the V-skill, you'd be forced to dash up and do a smaller combo. You get less damage and the opponent is way further away. V-skill 2 is also good for combo extensions that can push your opponent to the corner. V-skill 2 is a great way to whiff punish your opponent in neutral and carry them to the corner for big damage. It's definitely worth noting that since V-skill 2 can be cancelled from most normals, you can cancel off of a crouching heavy punch anti-air into V-skill 2 to escape the corner. Now we'll talk about V-skill 1. You'll generally see V-skill 1 paired with V-trigger 2 a lot, as that combination seems to blend pretty well. V-skill 1 is pretty useless on its own. It's really slow, but pretty easy to anti-air. The dive kick will leave you at a minus situation almost all the time. Probably sneak in a throw if your opponent is not expecting it, maybe behind a fireball of some kind. The best application is probably as a combo extender for V-trigger 2. If you activate mid-combo and don't want to spend any more V-meter, you can use the 3 punches to save meter and corner carry. That's pretty much all there is to V-skill 1. If you pair it with V-trigger 2, you have an easy time converting into big combos. Now let's talk about V-trigger 1. I generally recommend V-trigger 1 to people who are not sure which V-trigger to go with. This V-trigger is pretty versatile and can be used in pretty much every matchup. V-trigger 1 enhances Sakura's fireball. Comes out faster, travels a bit slower so it's harder to jump over. It pretty much acts like an EX fireball. You can confirm into combos off of it. The idea is that with this trigger, most of her combos give her good Oki afterwards, since you're ending most of them in heavy DP. I would recommend using V-trigger 1 for matchups that require you to have a good fireball. Sakura has a lot of trouble with zoning, so a good fireball can help her get in. Without having to spend meter or fully charge a regular fireball, V-trigger 1 makes it easy for you to have a good shield behind you to get in. It'll also allow you to win the fireball war against most characters. Sakura gets a new move called Hogasho, which I personally don't use very much because it costs V-meter. But it's +5 on block, which makes for a great meaty. Also, you can use it as a combo extender. Here's another reason why people might prefer V-Trigger 1 in neutral. It makes for great frame traps, forcing your opponent to block for a long time, and if you get a hit, you can confirm into a nice combo. V-Trigger 2. V-Trigger 2 is best used when you want to melt your opponent's health bar. For a character like Akuma, a V-Trigger 2 combo could be devastating. V-Trigger 2 is pretty risky to use, and you should pretty much only use it when you're confirming out of a combo. The Tatsu is very punishable. You end up being -10. My favorite thing about V-Trigger 2 is that it works off of a standing light kick. This is perfect for when you want to check dashes or punish something that's -4. I think it's also important to remember that with V-Trigger 2, you get a lot more invincible DPs. V-Skill 1 V-Trigger 1. This was Sakura's only option on her release. When she picked V-Trigger 1, she only had V-Skill 1 to work with. I've only really heard of one good use for this, as her V-Skill 2 is way better to use when you have V-Trigger 1, and that would be in a situation like so. But to me that seems kind of gimmicky and not really worth it. You can get some combos with V-Trigger 1. But to be honest, it doesn't really seem like a good combination at all. And lastly, we get to V-Skill 2 V-Trigger 2. This combination, I've heard a lot of pros say, is very useful. You sacrifice a little bit of damage, but you gain a lot of utility from it. With V-Skill 2, you gain access to a side switch combo while in V-Trigger. If you want big damage and utility, then you would go with this combination. In short, V-Trigger 2 Skill 1 for big damage, V-Trigger 1 Skill 2 for utility and better screen control, V-Trigger 2 and Skill 2 for a combination of both. V-Trigger 1 and Skill 1 not so great for much. Once again, it's a matter of what the matchup calls for and preference. Thanks for watching.